How does a man who started fashion in his 40s end up rewriting what power looks like?
Ho cominciato questo mestiere quasi per caso e piano piano questo mestiere mi ha coinvolto fino in fondo, rubandomi la vita.
Giorgio Armani didn't just make clothes, he created a uniform for authority. His jacket stripped away excess, his suits gave Hollywood its swagger, and his name became shorthand for elegance itself. Royals wore him, actors swore by him, and billionaires built their image around him. But Armani wasn't like other designers. He refused the theatrics, stayed independent while rivals sold out, and built a global empire entirely on his own terms. Hotels, interiors, fragrance, red carpets, all stamped with the same controlled discipline that made him untouchable. After his recent passing at 91, the question is bigger than ever. Who was the man behind it all? Who built this empire from nothing? And without him, can the brand survive in the same way? Or does the very idea of Armani change forever? This is not just the rise of Armani. It's the story of the man who gave his life to fashion. Most designers chase fame from the moment they can hold a pencil. They go to art schools, claw their way through apprenticeships, and try to leave their mark before they burn out. Giorgio Armani didn't. He was 41 when he finally put his own name on a label, an age when most fashion careers are already over. And yet, that late start became his advantage. Armani arrived in fashion with discipline, maturity, and a vision that felt fully formed. He grew up in Piacenza, a quiet industrial town in northern Italy, in a strict but modest household. Nothing about his early life suggested glamour. He studied medicine in Milan, dissecting cadavers instead of sketchbooks, but the long hours of anatomy drained him, and he dropped out before graduating. After military service, he decided to change paths entirely. Armani wasn't drawn to fashion so much as he stumbled into it. First as a window dresser at La Rinascente, the famous Milanese department store. There, he learned how clothes moved people, how a cut could flatter, how fabric caught the light, how customers reacted to display. By the 1960s, he slipped into design work for menswear houses like Allegri. Armani had no fashion school credentials, but he had something more important: instinct. Where others added flourish, he pared things back. He learned to subtract until only line and proportion remained. That restraint, clothes without noise, would become his signature. The real break came when he met Sergio Galeotti, an architect with a talent for persuasion. Galeotti believed Armani had what it took to stand on his own, and in 1975, the two launched Giorgio Armani with about $16,000 at the time. Armani was no longer sketching for other houses. He was building his own. And unlike the maximalist Italians around him, he wasn't chasing glitter. He was about control, presence, authority. At 41, Armani wasn't the industry's newest prodigy, but he was about to prove that age didn't matter when your vision was this sharp. Armani himself once explained, "If you're too sure of yourself, you become boring." Fear keeps you sharp. That constant fear of failure drove him forward. His late start was not a handicap. It was the beginning of a new idea of power. Armani's breakthrough came from a single idea: taking the stiffness out of tailoring. In the mid-1970s, men's suits were still built like armor: padded shoulders, rigid construction, a uniform that projected power but not ease. Armani looked at those silhouettes and decided to strip them down. He removed the lining, softened the shoulders, lightened the fabrics. The result was fluid, natural, almost casual, yet still authoritative. It was a revolution disguised as simplicity. He often said his goal wasn't to shock, but to make clothes people could truly live in. "I don't design clothes to make women or men look like fashion victims," Armani once explained. "I design clothes for real life." That practicality reflected who he was: reserved, precise, and almost obsessively disciplined. Armani never courted drama, either in his personality or in his work. The timing was perfect. The world was shifting, especially in America, where traditional power dressing was starting to look outdated. Armani's softer suits gave men a new way to look confident without looking rigid. And just as important, he offered women the same language of authority. His jackets and trousers for women weren't about decoration. They were about presence. It was a different kind of glamour. Presence in simplicity. Then came American Gigolo. In 1980, Armani's relationship with Hollywood exploded onto the screen when Richard Gere appeared in the film dressed head to toe in his suits. The movie wasn't just a hit. It was a 2-hour advertisement for Armani's new vision of masculinity. Gere's sleek, unstructured jackets became the look of the decade. Almost overnight, Armani wasn't just a designer in Milan. He was the name everyone wanted in their closet. By contrast, other Italian designers were going in the opposite direction. Gianni Versace was sending bondage leather down the runway, pushing shock value and spectacle. Armani stripped things back. Where Versace cinched and dazzled, Armani relaxed and refined. He didn't need gimmicks. His tailoring spoke louder than any provocation. The effect was immediate. Armani's suits became the new uniform for businessmen, actors, politicians, and the growing class of global elites. Armani later admitted that even in success, he carried a constant fear of failure. "I've always been afraid of not being understood, of not having genius. Fear forces you to do better." That mixture of confidence and doubt was the engine behind his precision. In less than a decade, he had turned an unlined jacket into a cultural symbol. Armani had made minimalism into power. So by the 1980s, Armani's suits had transformed both the business world and Hollywood, but it was the film industry that truly turned him into a household name. On screen and off, actors began adopting Armani as their uniform for credibility. Diane Keaton wore his clean silhouettes, blending her tomboy style with Armani's tailored ease, while stars like Robert De Niro and Al Pacino wore his suits both in films and in their private lives. Armani wasn't just dressing characters, he was dressing the men and women who defined American culture at the time. By the end of the decade, Julia Roberts stepped onto the Golden Globe stage in a men's Armani suit, oversized, defiant, and instantly iconic. For Armani, that moment wasn't about androgyny or fashion statements. It was about giving women authority where it had traditionally been denied. As he put it, "I realized that they needed a way to dress that was equivalent to that of men." What set Armani apart was the way his clothes translated on camera. His tailoring had movement, lightness, and a subtle drama that made them perfect for the screen. Costume designers noticed, actors noticed, and soon Armani's name was linked with a new kind of red carpet glamour. Not theatrical gowns, but sleek simplicity that carried weight. Beyond Hollywood, Armani was also becoming the choice of Europe's most visible women. Diana, Princess of Wales, wore his sharp jackets in the mid-1990s, giving Armani an association with modern royalty at a time when the world was obsessed with her every look. Caroline Kennedy and Lee Radziwill, fixtures of American high society, also turned to Armani for his quiet authority. Each appearance reinforced the same message. Armani was elegance without excess. By the close of the 1990s, Armani had achieved something rare. He was no longer just a designer or even a brand. He was a symbol of credibility. On screen, on stage, in palace portraits, wearing Armani meant projecting strength without shouting. That reputation set the stage for what came next. Not just dressing individuals, but building a global empire that extended his philosophy into every part of life. So by the early 2000s, Armani's reputation was unshakable. He had dressed Hollywood, won over royalty, and built his name into a symbol of credibility. But Armani wasn't just interested in influence. He wanted permanence. In 2005, he launched Armani Privé, his first haute couture line. Unlike Dior or Galliano's theatrics, Privé wasn't about spectacle. It was about distilling elegance into its purest form: champagne-toned gowns, razor-sharp suits, clothes designed to look as relevant decades later as they did the night they were worn. On the Oscars carpet, Privé became shorthand for sophistication without noise. But Privé was only one part of a much larger machine. Over 3 decades, Armani had constructed a brand ladder that covered nearly every tier of fashion. At the top sat Giorgio Armani and Privé, reserved for the elite. Emporio Armani offered accessible luxury to a younger international audience. Armani Exchange, with its street-facing logos, captured the mass market. Together, the structure allowed Armani to clothe almost anyone without blurring the brand's identity. It was a carefully engineered system, each tier distinct but unmistakably Armani. Then came lifestyle. Armani Casa translated his minimalism into interiors and furniture. Armani hotels opened in Milan and Dubai, offering guests the chance to live inside his aesthetic. Fragrance, beauty, eyewear, and restaurants followed. By the late 2000s, Armani wasn't just selling clothes. He was selling a complete environment, one of the first designers to successfully build fashion into a full-scale lifestyle. What made it even more remarkable was his independence. While most of his rivals eventually sold stakes to LVMH or Kering, Armani refused. He kept the company private and under his sole control, overseeing every collection and every extension of the brand. Executives described him as a perfectionist who micromanaged details from advertising campaigns to store interiors. Armani wasn't just a designer. He was a businessman who believed coherence was as important as creativity. The strategy paid off. In 2001, Forbes named him the most successful Italian designer, and by the 2010s, the magazine estimated his fortune at over $12 billion, making him one of the richest designers in history. And unlike his rivals, he didn't answer to shareholders or corporate boards. Armani was the rare designer who not only defined an aesthetic, but also built one of the most powerful independent empires in fashion, a machine that bore his name at every level, and one he never let slip out of his control. If Armani's empire was vast, his philosophy stayed remarkably simple. He always insisted fashion wasn't about noise, but about clarity. When he opened Armani Silos in Milan in 2015, a towering museum to his archive, he explained, "You can invent the most beautiful garments, but if they don't reflect the society you live in, they have no meaning." For Armani, relevance mattered more than spectacle. The Silos wasn't a vanity project. It was a reminder that his work was meant to last. That discipline carried into his personal life as well. Armani was famously private, even austere. But he admitted to regrets. He once confessed that his work had consumed him, that he had given too much of himself to the company and too little to his own life. The death of his partner Sergio Galeotti in 1985 had been devastating, and Armani coped by burying himself in the business. It gave him control, but it also meant that Armani the man was often hidden behind Armani the empire. By the summer of 2025, his health was declining. For the first time, he missed Milan Fashion Week, a show he had never failed to attend. Yet even then, he kept working on collections until the very end. Just a year earlier, he had told Corriere della Sera that he planned to retire within 2 or 3 years, admitting, "I won't keep working longer, that would not be good." But he never got the chance. On September 4th, 2025, Giorgio Armani passed away in Milan at the age of 91, surrounded by family and by Leo Dell'Orco, his trusted right hand for more than 20 years. His company released a statement filled with love and loyalty, promising to carry forward his vision with respect, responsibility, and love. Thousands paid tribute at Armani Teatro, though the funeral itself was kept private, exactly as he wished. Now, the question is, what happens to Armani without Armani? He left behind a structure, his sister Rosanna, his nieces Silvana and Roberta, his nephew Andrea Camarana, and his life and business partner Leo Dell'Orco will all share responsibility. The Armani Foundation is expected to help preserve the brand's independence. He had no children to inherit the empire, and while investors had shown interest, he had resisted outside ownership. But the truth is, nobody controlled this company like Giorgio himself. Without him, will the brand keep its coherence? Or does the very idea of Armani start to shift? And maybe that's where we turn it over to you. Armani once said that true elegance wasn't about being noticed, but about being remembered. Do you think his brand will still carry that memory in the decades to come? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and as always, see you in the next one.